Hello, this is for the YouTube side. Um, Welcome to day 5 of the workshop. I believe it's day 5. Uh, as you may know, last week, midstream, the whole Twitch channel died because I dared to show a bare naked butt on screen, which is against Twitch TOS. Sucks, but you're not supposed to do that. So we lost a lot of the homework review, which I honestly thought was very, very valuable to go over. So we'll go over some of those submissions that we got last week, um, just so that YouTube has a few things to understand about gesture drawing and what you can add in to your gestures to make them pop a bit more and help you comprehend how figure is meant to be expressed. So, we'll start off the homework re-review. If most people aren't in yet, because I already went over stuff that they already knew, that's fine. Let's start off with Latverian B from Blue Sky. So we already he was here for the live review. He was here for the live review. That's okay. But as I said to him before, glad. Ooh, wait, there we go. Now we can use you can use a brighter color. We can use the brighter color, just so long as it doesn't burn my eyes. All right, green. Does that show up on stream? Let's just use red. Yeah, red's a easier color. But good to see. Not only did he see the C line of action in this gesture, he broke up the leg such that, as we discussed, the calf is host to these curves inside of it. So if we break down a calf, that's roughly what it is, and the bones inside of it, they look something like this. In fact, I believe it's like this is your thigh bone. This is the calf itself. There's a lot of gesture to be found in this curve. So as I say a lot, it's nice to see this in there. But I think it's important as well to identify that your shoulders are also host to certain gestures as well. There's many gesture in everything. And additionally, it's good to see bean studies are continued to be employed. Just remember your hips, they rest more like halfway up the lower bean. So just keep that in mind if you're going to start your legs. This is okay. And because these are short gestures. When I signed Do a Gesture Draw Party, those are like 20 minutes long. They come with 5 1-minute poses, and you're supposed to bang these out really fast. So in the interest of time, I understand overlooking that, but just keep that in mind. YouTube crew, and this is good. Good use of straights and curves. And here, it looks like I might have not commented on this before. I might actually have forgotten to last week, but this appears to be a curve or a twist actually, because this person's shoulder is drooping right here. And this is the dangers of only using straights in certain contexts, because it's really hard to tell where the arm is meant to begin on this figure, but it looks like they're curving away. They're twisting away. So this is a motion that should be expressed in the bean through more overlap, and by erasing specifically where that overlap would occur, so that you can further emphasize which side of the body is the straight, contrasting with its pinch. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, it's good that you're seeing how the body's twisting and forming around things. And as here, these are good as well. Following up really, really well on setting down where the shoulders are. And I believe I commented the week before I would like to see a little bit more overlap within shapes because it's good to see how these shapes overlap. It forces you to stop thinking about like, oh, I gotta make sure this is specifically right there. No, just um, put to practice some of the things we've been going over. Ghost your lines a little bit before settling it in. Um, Maybe he was doing that. I'm not sure. Um, Make sure that your shapes are appropriately. Uh, I want to see this overlap. It's like math. I need to see your work, and it helps yourself. It helps yourself comprehend how these things are meant to lay up on top of one another. So in this case, it's good that you drew both circles. I need to see more specifically where the straight is. Not necessarily a straight, but what is the tense side and what is the side with slack? What not necessarily. No, that's a bad analogy. Where is it being pulled tight? Where is it pinching? I need to see that expressed when you do a bean drawing. And again here, this is a good line of action. This is good to be able to see it flowing, and then it carries through in the legs right there. But we just need to see a little bit more definitive, like direction for the shoulders. If this person was reaching back, or if this person was twisting to the side, I'm not sure. I can't really tell. But this is why we need to identify these things. What's the front plane? Like, especially in your bean, you got to be able to identify what's the front plane, what's the side plane, etc., etc. Not much. There isn't a lot of ways to apply that when you're, what's the word? When you're just using ovals. But something to keep in mind as you're going through stuff. And here again, we can. It's good to give separation in the limbs, where you can, if you need to. In this case, I think it really needed it, but maybe that's not how the person looked in the video. I'm just giving my little feedback, but this is good. I'm glad that he took to heart that calves have curves. Hello for anyone stopping in again. I'm just quickly going over the homework that I reviewed last week that got lost when the channel died. I'm not giving it super in-depth critique because I don't want to waste too much time on it. But I just want to leave some important feedback that I would like the YouTube VOD crew to understand, or at least have ready for them. So this session was meant to be a bit shorter, but since I'm cramming another homework review in anyway, I guess it might run as long as before. But here's their longer study. This was the 2-minute poses, I believe, which lets you experiment with using lines to convey. I let you use more lines to convey structure behind what you do. So excellent line of action. You see it right here, but then you see that the rest of this pose follows through in there. Same for here. This is a straight. Maybe it could have been a curve, but this is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a small amount of foreshortening being applied here. I appreciate it. It's hard to keep track of every single principle we've gone over in regards to like how perspective works, what should be flat, where do we see the top plane and all that. Because you might not have gained an intuition for it in the short amount of time we've been doing this workshop. But you gotta be able to keep it in mind. You gotta do these practices more and more off the clock. You just gotta do your perspective. You gotta figure things out. On longer figure drawing, maybe you can afford to slow down and examine a figure with more perspective in mind. In this case, because we are seeing that the shoulders we can't see the top of the shoulders. This is probably where the horizon line is. And I believe on the gesture draw party videos, the camera is usually aligned with the middle of the screen, what you see on the recording. So that's where the horizon line is, and you can use that as a little shorthand. As opposed to if you watch figure drawing live, usually you see a person, like, usually you're looking up at a model in a live figure drawing session, but sometimes you'll be eye level with a person, well, as eye level as you can get, but usually you're not usually like seeing somebody like right here. You're usually looking up, or you're situated further in the back. So this model appears to be a little closer to your eye level. It really depends. It really depends on where you're situated. But either way, some of the critiques I had earlier, again, you might want to be a bit more mindful about where your twists are in your figure. Maybe it is supposed to be right here. Actually, maybe that's perfect. Maybe this is just how this twist needed to be expressed. We just needed to see this side of it a bit more. And again, right here. This is good. Good line of action. I'm happy to see that through Latverian B's work, he's seeing. He's seeing gesture. He's seeing lines of action. The structure does need a bit more work. We'll get to that, though. But I like seeing what he's doing. So let me pull up the last one. I believe at the very end, I said, chat says badge is goated. Truing. So for the last segment, I said to do, this is on the homework I assigned, it was measure the figure with the 7.5 head method. What to do next week. No, not next week. Next Thursday, which is really this Thursday, is the RoboBean and the 11.5 head method. But for this homework review, we're only looking at the 7.5 head method. So, I'm trying to remember exactly what I did last time, but let's measure, roughly speaking, the head that variant B used. If I can grab it, and we'll just measure up how this how he did it. How did he measure it up? Did he do it well? Subjective well. So up to here, we can see. So Badge is also doing this. Latverian B is doing this on traditional, on pencil and paper. It's a bit harder to measure this, to keep these measurements standardized, but that's why I say use your pencil, measure it out consistently, like maybe you measure it with your thumb. Just as long as you have a stable means of measurement, that's how you keep these things straight. So, for doing it traditionally, that's not bad. That's 4 heads tall, as the 7.5 method asks. And this is the female figure. I don't think we had the time to go over how to do... Well, we did. We did have the time to do the female figure. I didn't differentiate last week on the 11.5 method with the female figure. I didn't extrapolate much deeper, but the same proportions generally applied. But either way, that's 4 heads long, and then we separate it down. About halfway down from the head, that's where that starts. Bam. 1, 2, 3, 4. And point it out. Halfway down the head, about halfway down the head, that's where your ankle is. I should probably have done this more straight on, but yes. Ankle starts about there, and then your foot hits the bottom. So, body-wise, body length-wise, is it length or height? Body height-wise, this is correct. We had some difficulties. No, this is the male figure. Because of the mark of Aries. He's a strong warrior. I said last week, it's a little hard to tell how to measure the body under the 7.5 head method. Because it's hard to tell the shoulder span. I believe the shoulder span is 2 heads wide. But on a female figure, it's hard to tell because it's like 1 2/3. And then it's like, how do you measure? How do you intuit cutting 2 2 2/3 of a head? Sorry, Sorry, 1 2/3 anyway. How do you intuit that? It's hard. So on this figure, I believe that's a little wide, but it's also not following the width that it should have. And maybe the figure is actually really skinny, so setting it all the way out there isn't the right idea. So if you did this, sorry, it's more like this because the hips are much thinner by comparison. But if you did this, I don't know if it would have been necessarily more correct. But nailing this is a little tough. That's why I recommend not to pass the buck off, but see how other people use this head height method to tell if you're doing it correctly. But all things considered, most of the landmarks are aligning where they should. At the very bottom of the second head, there's the nipples. Use your navel halfway through. And I believe it was around here that the 10th rib is located. Something like that. At the 4th, this is roughly where the pelvis begins. And then halfway down, this is where your leg is actually like connected. So at the halfway down point, there's a knee joint. And then halfway through the final head is the ankle. So all of that is pretty on key, pretty on point. The arm lengths are about 3 heads long. 1 head length for each, kind of. Your upper arm is actually longer than your forearm. Feels a little bit off from how I've been drawing it all my life. Not all my life, but for a while. But that is about how it goes. Starting from about the armpit is where you begin your measurements, because the shoulder is not part of the torso. It should not be counted as part of the torso. The shoulder is separate. So from about 1 head length down, that's where the elbow is, and then at another head length down, it's about here, and I think about halfway through. No, a little bit. It's a little more than that. The wrist, it's somewhere around here that the wrist begins, like 2/3 of the way down, and then the hand is out there. It's been a week. I didn't really think about this beyond. I haven't thought about this in a week, which is a little bit of an issue. But overall, the parts that matter, the head length, height, I mean, they all matter. All parts of this method matter. But you've got the big gist of it. We just need to work on our torso widths. And again, this might not seem correct to make somebody that wide, but it kind of is. People are much wider than you give them credit for, because if your bodies are too thin, this is not a realistic sense of proportion. You can draw like this afterwards if that's how you want to stylize fictional characters. But when you're doing people drawing, they need to be a bit wider in general. All right, so I'm going to quickly run over. This took a bit longer than intended. Badges review. Yeah, it took 20 minutes. Yeah, a little bit longer than intended. So let's stuff all this back in this folder, and let's go over Teraptosaurus from Blue Sky. Here is his figure drawing. I believe, yes, this included the entire Jester Draw Party. So, good gestures, very good gestures. I like this little curve here, this S curve, to emphasize this twist in the torso. Didn't have time to draw a bean, that's okay. I said only draw a bean if you have the time to. Only draw a chin if you have the time to as well. And on those 1 minute drawings, there's not a lot of room to do it. I pointed out last week he did his drawing with a pen, which is a little crazy, but he said it was so that he wouldn't feel tempted to erase, and he would just commit to drawing it, which is insane, but very respectable form of insanity. And so, yeah, on this other gesture, he picked up that shoulders and hips have curves. Good. Because they move. When you move your shoulder, the whole thing comes up. Not just the shoulder joint itself does not raise on its own. The whole thing angles up with it. So that's good. Again, some of the criticisms I hold. Remember that your hips actually start up here, and at the very bottom of the bean you can attach your legs. Just keep that in mind. Some of this gesture you might see in the hip. It tends to be controlled halfway up the lower bean. This is nice. I like this. Very good. Straights and curves. Very, very good. Seeing how this bean moves around. And, again, really like that people are seeing that there's more to a calf. There's more to calves than just, well, I mean, I added that curve in, but this is the implied, like, the curves. These elements are just a little bit offset from each other, which I like to see. And here was Pyro's attempt. Teraptosaurus, sorry. I don't know his other internet name. I'm pretending I don't know that. Teraptosaurus did a good job on this. I like seeing how that comes up, how this comes up. Straights. This might be an instance where straights are good, but you can overshoot. On gesture drawing, feel free to overshoot and mess up your anatomy as much as you want, because the idea is when you're doing gesture drawing, you're just seeing motion. You're just seeing how things move, and it's warming your eye up to see how things are supposed to actually work. You're not introducing proportion yet because you're not looking for proportion yet. You can refine how your figures come out once you apply proportion. Oftentimes, when you over account for something, when you overdo something, and then you apply the proportion, it's like cooking. It's like when you have a really nice slab of meat, you put it on the pan, you think that whole thing's gonna cook through, then it shrinks, and it gets smaller. That's basically what gesture is to proportion drawing. So moving along, very nice gesture. I love to see that. I like to see this pinch in a bean. And one little thing, again, I gotta emphasize, wherever there is a straight, there tends to be a bump in contrast. And maybe this could have a little bit more rhythm to it, rather than just like being two curves that come through. Maybe it is correct though. Maybe it is correct. I don't have the gesture draw party available. But maybe this shape carries through like this because I can see that leg is turning. And there's a bit more gesture when you draw a leg doing this as opposed to drawing a leg doing this. This one, it emphasizes the form, it emphasizes the shape. You're seeing how these elements overlap each other, but there's just a bit more movement. There's a bit more fluidity when you're able to refine how the body moves within just one line. And again, here's Teraptosaurus's attempts. I don't want to downplay how he did it by calling it an attempt. That's rude. This is a good practice. And again, he's doing this all on one sheet of paper. I don't know how big the sheet of paper is, but it could be printer sized. It could be printer paper sized. And using it's a little bit off. It's just a little bit off. I think he personally measured it with too many heads, but it still works out. Even if I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 heads, I think he miscounted. He might have forgotten how it works. But he got the spirit. He got the basic how it's supposed to measure out correctly. And then let's look at this one. Are the joints? The joints start about halfway down the hips. 1, 2, and then there's your 3, 4. And he said this model was on their tiptoes, so he thought it was appropriate for the heads to be just a little bit off. And I agree with that, because the 7.5 head method, it works most of all when a person is just like standing there, stock still. being studied just as they are. And it has its failings whenever that figure breaks out of the mold. I believe, and I think I go over this when we practiced the 11.5 head method last week, the joint, when the joint moves, the head height isn't really being accounted for. You can't measure this like empty space here. You just gotta keep measuring the limbs that the heads are ascribed to. So again, these are good gestures. I like this. I like this big pinch and this tautness of the torso. But again, measuring the head to be a certain length, especially width-wise across the body. I had trouble just trying to express that. So getting it correctly is really, really hard. Especially whether this is a male or female form, when you see it in perspective. It's really hard to measure, which is why we have the 11.5 head method to call upon. But otherwise, you see where I think there's a bit of a misstep. I'm eyeballing the head size rather than copy pasting it, which is a bad thing. But we can see here this torso. I think he overshot it, but it's still like somehow he came up to a relatively proportionate answer anyway, which is good. In this case, maybe it would have been a little more along this lines, but he still basically got it, which is good. Now it's Teraptosaurus' submission. I told people who didn't finish it all the way, if you wanted to submit it, you can send it in for feedback again, which is what this next person did. Is Retro Candy Art on Twitter and Blue Sky. The pics are a little bit small, but I discussed their submissions last week. They said they have a tendency to draw the shoulders and the hips a little straight on with the camera when they shouldn't. I agree. So learning to tilt your limbs where you can is a good idea. This is why I emphasize the bean. You can't really turn a circle in perspective. There's no such thing, really. But having some form to declare, like, where's the horizontal endpoints of such things, or the vertical endpoints of such things, helps. But that was their main criticism. In other cases, like here, this is a bit winged. This is the beginning of their gesture drawing, so their eyes weren't totally warmed up yet. But I suggested look for the shape that the outermost part of the body tends to make. So if they were looking at the thigh, and this is the shape the thigh makes, well, that's okay. But a lot of the form is carried by stuff that points out rather than the stuff that points in. Rather than lines, quote lines, no such thing as a line in reality. But if you see like the edge of a shape and it points outwards, in the direction that a person is facing, that's a good way to observe how that part of the limb is moving. As we move along here, I'm really, really glad people took to heart. Calves have curves. Very good line of action. You have a good sense for that. Just need a bit more to tell apart. Not tell apart, but tell where these shoulders and hips are going. Like they do here. It's a little bit narrower to emphasize that there's a limb coming from the back. And with here, maybe they were flying a little bit on reflex doing this, because to me, if there's a line of action coming here, maybe it's going like this. Maybe it goes like this down. There's a couple different ways to do it. I didn't necessarily do it the wrong way. I'm just throwing out how I think the form could be a bit improved. So this is from the 5-minute sessions again. You're getting your feet wet. I never said your homework had to be like after you spend an hour warming up, it can be your warm up before you start drawing for the day. But they did a good job. This is their first batch. They didn't get to do the proportionate drawing part, which a little unfortunate. But they can always do more of those another time. This is from the second batch. These are the 2-minute drawing, 2-minute gestures that you get in the gesture draw party videos. And they're good. They're an improvement on what we saw last time. I believe they said they were drawing a bean here, but then they decided, no, I'm not going to put the bean there for some reason. Maybe it didn't jive with them. But you can see that their body is kind of at a twist. Their body is a little bit twisting, and that's what I would have really liked to see if they were to emphasize a bean. Because then you get to see this sort of motion going on there. You can tell this foot is moving forward, this leg is moving backwards. Would have been really neat to see how that motion gets expressed. And right here, this is another point where I say you really, really gotta, if this is the shape that you're trying to express with your hips, instead, try something like this. Try doing something like this. This is where beans help. It's also where being able to draw more than just like the bottom line of the hips helps in just expressing which of these comes apart. But I believe that was the bulk of what I had to say that I can remember to say. I don't want to spend too much more time on the homework review because we've been here for like 45 minutes. It's more like 30 minutes. But I'd like to get to the stuff that we are going to be getting into today. So one final submission. This comes from Mr. Lart on Twitter and Blue Sky. Mr. Art went to college. They're more experienced. So they kind of know what they're doing a bit more. So, you know, they've got very good gestures. They've got very good gestures going on. They know how to do a bean. She knows how to do a bean. Tightness, pinch, good attention to where the shoulders go. I think there could be a bit more around there. I like this shape going on through here. I like this going on through there. And you can see through the paper, there's a bunch of warm-ups. I do encourage. And I didn't, oh, I messed it up. I didn't warm up again. This is... This is a joke recycled from last week, but I didn't warm up, so I completely missed the pinwheel that she already made. But do warm-ups. Fill a page up with how things work, and so on and so forth. This is a really, really excellent gesture. Really, really happy to see this curve in the hips especially. There's motion in how those things come together. So that's neat. I like this. Once again, pinch in a bean. Pinch in a bean. Tightness. So that's good. This is a continuation of the 1-minute poses up at the top. Very nice. I like to see this motion. Very good use of like very subtle curve and straight for these parts in particular. I like how they're seeing the world. It's very nice. Yeah, this one went off screen. This one went off the page. And for the 2-minute pause, they decided to go a bit crazy. They did a lot. She did a lot. But this is nice. Good structure. Mr. Art has been in the game for a while, so they can get away with putting more details. Hi, Mistral. Hi again, Mistral. Do you remember what I went... She's in chat. You remember what other feedback I had to offer? I just think you did a really good job with these curves in the figure. This is insane. Insane amount of detail. Even put the clothes for a 2-minute 2-minute thingy. This is nice. Again, I like this. I like this a lot. Can't remember. That's okay, because I can't remember either. And we're kind of going through fast forward. I do recall when we were discussing proportions last week, you draw legs lankier than you think you do, lankier than you thought you did, rather. And even on here, these felt foreign, but legs are actually a lot stubbier than we think they are, in proportion to the rest of our bodies. And it's funny. Again, artist who's been in the game for a while, remembering how to do proportions, and she did a good job, following this measuring for themselves. They marked it out off to the side of the figure, where the head roughly lines up, and where everything would go together. I think she did a good job following gesture and then refining it with proportion. Mistral, do you remember if you used the head to measure the body or measure the width of the body, or did you wing it? I believe you said you winged it, which is really funny to me. Over here too, very good. The height of it is correct to me, I believe. I'm just trusting these little marks for measuring. Which is good, and a good gesture through here. Good, right there. Eto bleh. Yes, she did wing the width of the torso, which I don't blame. It's really confusing. How do you just intuit? How much is 1 2/3? I'm pretty sure on a female body it's less than that, actually, or it's about the same, but the hips are wider, because that's how it is on a male skeleton versus a female skeleton. All that aside, it's good work, and I showed a little bit of humility last week as well. Let me see if I can find the art piece that I used for an example. I'm also prone to just like, I've not properly studied proportion and stuff in years. I did hit the point where I just kind of stopped thinking about it too much, because when I drew proportionately, it was nice and all, but it wasn't achieving the look that I wanted. So if I were to measure my character here, this is Mayose Shizuka, I roughly measured the head length. It's a little bit longer, actually, a little bit wider. You can see right away I am not obeying how I'm not obeying at all how wide a body should be, and the head length, the height of it is off as well. So like, if I measured this across, and I shouldn't be measuring from the shoulder, I should be measuring from the head itself, I make bodies about a head length wide. That's not correct. I probably could be giving them a bit more width. And you can see, like, even if I were to measure this all the way down, length of her body, oops, her body is 3.5 heads tall. Her nipples, where her nipples would be, rather, do not align with where they should be. And then when I try to, this isn't even, like, if I were to just take this head height all the way down rather than starting it where it's supposed to be, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 heads long. It's not even it's not correct. And if I take it to about where the legs start, 1, 2, heck, 3, 4, that's just off. That's just off in so many ways. But even though it's not proportionate, did we lose appeal? No. We have a baseline understanding of proportion that lets us learn how to break the rules of it all. And I'm not saying start breaking rules now. No, do that on your own time. We're learning proportion and anatomy, not necessarily anatomy, but we are learning how to draw real people proportionately. It's the objective of this workshop, being able to see motion, being able to see how the body breaks down. Learn the rules before you break them, says Cyborg Wizard. I agree. It's the truth. So that was last week's homework. I think I wrapped it up in a shorter amount of time compared to compared to last week. So now I'd like to take a moment. If your brains haven't turned to mush from me yapping about stuff we've already went over, I'd like to put on a video about... That's not the correct Firefox window that I wanted to put at. Let's turn this on. Ooh, you're all the way up there. Ooh. Let's expand this. This is a video I caught last week that I wanted to show then, but I didn't think it was needed yet. Hold on. You can see my... look at my bookmarks. And we'll... What's up? About here. Yeah. And I'll full screen it. So I saw this video last week. Or it might have been the week before. I kept meaning to show it, but I didn't get a chance to because it wasn't part of the lesson plan, and it would just run overtime. But I'd like to show this now. Is perspective real? No. No, it isn't. Perspective rather, is something we as humans made up to make drawing make more sense. So this is a bit of a lengthy video. I don't know how much of it I'm gonna show. We'll see where I stop. But I'd like you to keep this in mind. Keep what these two guys talk about in mind as you do more of your figure drawing, as you do more drawing shapes in perspective, or even just doing perspective practice at all. Is perspective real? No, but it's a good invention that we as humanity invented. Good invention that humanity invented. It's redundant in here. But I think this is a good watch. So put on your thinking cap. I hope it's already been on. Please tune back in if you've been tuning out for a bit. And if you are not in the stream, well, whatever. Please watch.
So today I'm going to talk about whether or not perspective is real.
It's not.
Let me turn down the...
For those of you who do not know, this is Marshal Vandruff, co-host of the Draftsman podcast and master perspective instructor. Very humble. The question is, like, what is perspective? Is it a science? Is it just math? Do we actually see things the way perspective rules tell us we see things? Why are there so many different methods? There's 2-point perspective, then you got 3-point perspective, you got 5-point and fisheye, and 1-point perspective? Like, how can all of these be true at the same time?
I think that it is both an invention and a discovery, because the laws of perspective really do work. They work out on paper where there is a predictability the way it works with math. What is math? Is it an invention or is it a discovery? I think it's both. I think that we find out there are truths about the way things work, and then we have to invent methods to contain it, to use it, to understand it. What were the different ones you listed?
1-point, 2-point, 3-point, 5-point, fisheye.
Fisheye is 5-point.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are inventions. Absolutely.
Okay.
That somebody made a rule that in 1-point perspective you can only have 1 point, etc. But here is a better way to look at it. When we see the world, we are in this bubble of complexity. There is no flat surface we're looking at. We move our head, we move our eyes, we see peripherally, and just for a moment, look around you and look at how there is a sphere of perception. Now,
It's hard to see that sphere, though. I see straight lines. It's probably my brain interpreting rounded curves as straights because I know that they're straight. Right.
That is exactly what's happening. It is an optical illusion, and the proof of it is that if you sit down and do what people call perceptual perspective, where you draw what's in front of you, and it will, if you're looking directly at it, it will probably be in 1 point. But you draw that the way you see it. You put this in the center of your page. You then look up to your left, up to your right, down to your right, down to your left, and do this to the sides and above, and draw things as you see them. And you will find that if you're pretty true to what you're seeing, there are going to be curved lines in there. They're going to have
You're going to have to curve them in order to connect them to the other.
You're going to have to, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you make the discovery that I'm looking at a curved world. The problem is that we are trying to draw something on a flat piece of paper, which, how are we going to account from that? Okay, we can do this perceptual perspective thing where we will curve the lines in the picture. Or we can even go simpler and say, sit in a hallway, look straight down the hallway, and notice all of these straight lines going away from you converge at one point. That's 1 point perspective. The other lines will be horizontal or vertical.
Perfectly horizontal, perfectly vertical. Also, because if they're not perfectly horizontal or vertical, you have to add another point where they converge.
That's
and it's no longer 1 point.
That's right. But you try taking a 1 point picture with your panorama view on your camera and see what happens. Can't do it. So yes, we simplify and say 1 point goes away, verticals, horizontals. But as soon as you look at something on its corner, where you're looking at it and 2 sets of lines are going away, the way we simplify this, it's an invention.
I'd like to say, yeah, I probably should have said that more. That's what 2 point perspective is. Again, it's also an invention. We made this stuff up. Maybe it doesn't necessarily exist in nature, but we made it up to understand how to draw stuff.
As we say, the ones going off to the left, the ones going off to the right, they will each have their point, and the ones going straight up and down will not. They'll just go straight up and down all through the picture. Yeah.
So we still have not made those verticals converge yet.
Yes. And then as soon as we look dramatically down on that thing or dramatically up at it, then we have to have a third point because those lines are going away and they are tapering to a vanishing point if we're trying to understand it on a flat piece of paper. So that's where 3 point comes in. But then as soon as we want to spread out the view like you get with your panorama camera, you're going to end up having a vanishing point in the middle, vanishing points on either side. You look up, you look down, vanishing points above and below. So there are perspective teachers who don't even like this business of 1, 2, and 3 point perspective. They feel like, why teach students that when it's such an artificial construct? And
how do they get the students to understand what they're seeing?
Crazy, right? Like, where do you even start? But it's crazy.
Without naming any names,
Okay.
I am still going to interview a teacher who was really against it. He told me, do you teach at 1, 2, and 3 point? I say I explain 1, 2, and 3 point, but I don't try to boil all of life down to that, except as a way to introduce it.
Which I think is a pretty good way of going about it. Again, none of these actually exist in reality. Perspective is a lie, but drawing it's a pretty handy tool.
Look at what Rembert does with his drawings where he's unfolding space. Yeah. He has got multiple vanishing points in there, and he understands the simplicity of 5 point, crazy as that sounds. 5 point is relatively simple.
No, it isn't. Screw you. Now you understand what you're saying, Grandpa.
We're not going to 5 point in this course. For this basic course, we will stick with 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
This is all we need to start, like you said, introducing ourselves to the idea. And then once you're comfortable with those, then you can start going to 5. But that'll be for Marshal's course.
Yes. For my course.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 point have only to do with parallel lines. That is 2 lines that are going away in the same direction. When they are going away in the same direction, will land at a point somewhere out there far away. If it's level, at the horizon. If it's not level, not at the horizon, above or below. But here's the big thing. Parallel lines will meet somewhere. If there's 2 sets, figure there's going to be 2 vanishing points. If there's 3 sets, 3. If there's tumbling things all over, all sorts of vanishing points.
It's crazy. I told you. In reality, everything has its own vanishing point. Every object you see, ascribes to its own vanishing point. That's for the crazy. That's for really, really crazy compositions. However, not everyone in the world, when they do these sort of things, when they make these sort of drawings, this is designed to point at several different like perspectives. But when people do these compositions, I might be getting ahead of the video, they're not making all of these vanishing points to look at. What they're seeing is they're intuiting how perspective works, and that each line, parallel lines, maybe they exist a little bit, but the essence of a parallel line is that they have to be, as they were just going over, they'll eventually converge. So just understanding that a box has lines that converge, that's the secret to perspective. Pardon me. I don't know if you heard that. My brother's been trying to not tame, but coexist with our stray cats. He got a bed to see if any of them would go inside of it, and one of his favorites finally went inside the bed. So that's neat. Anyway, the secret to perspective is understanding how to draw a box, and they'll go over that.
Get used to this, because understanding it helps you to put things into boxes and then have some control about how you are drawing them in space. It is an artificial construct. It's an invention, the way scales are an invention in music, but they are useful for all sorts of musical performance. That's the simplest I can get for why you care about blocks with parallel lines going away.
Which is the closest to reality?
Of those?
Of all the methods we have.
Oh, 5 point is closest. Yeah.
Okay. There's nothing closer.
Well, there may be if you have, say, 17 point, 21 point, really? 36 point, yes.
You should do one.
Well.
But when you say like 20 point, do you just mean that like, oh, this sketchbook is no longer perpendicular to the horizons or parallel, so now we have to add another point.
And this one and this one. But yes,
okay.
5 point is enough because we've got things, what have we got? We've got things in front of us, above us, below us, to our left, to our right, and the compromises in between.
So if I just have 2 boxes and I take one of them and I kind of like shift them in all 3 axes, now we have 6 point perspective suddenly.
Here's a way to look at it. This business of 1, 2, 3, and 5 point has as much to do with how we are perceiving the world out of one eye, not 2 eyes. As soon as you bring 2 eyes into it, it's more complicated. We're seeing the world with 2 eyes. Put it on paper, and we simplify by saying, just look at it through one eye, like a camera lens. That simplifies in one way.
I hope that analogy works for people in chat. Like, I hadn't thought about it like that, but that kind of is what drawing is. Ooh, in your eyes crossed, they see 2 different things.
The next thing is to say, are we looking at something straight on or at the corner? And are we looking at stuff above it where we'd have to lift up our eyes and look up at lines going way up and look down? And the more we spread out the field of vision, the more we need all 5 points.
Okay.
But I feel like
that's a good explanation of when you go from one to the other. And is the general rule to keep it toward this as simple as possible? Like if all you need is 1 point to represent what your view is, then you stick with one?
I wouldn't say that.
No?
No. Because 1 point perspective has a history that it tends to create symmetry, especially if you put it in the middle. So you find it in a lot of classical art where things on the left and things at the right and things above are all pointing to one picture or to 1 point in the middle or somewhere near the middle. Because as soon as you move it off to the side, you start to need another point to come in there.
Right. Everything that's farther away starts to look a little bit too weird and not the way it would actually look.
Do you remember what Kim Jong-gi said in one of those demos about he didn't really learn 1, 2, and 3 point perspective? He simply learned to draw the box.
Crazy! The Kim Jong-gi. I like to watch PCAT videos. She references this guy a lot. She says a lot of artists have a Kim Jong-gi phase where you're just like, Kim Jong-gi is famous for not drawing structure, for not needing to draw structure. He just belts things out like crazy. Not all of us are Kim Jong-gi, but they are a bit words to live by. You just got to learn to intuit things in a similar fashion, which is crazy. It was so crazy to think about. That's hard, but I'll let it keep going. I don't want to keep stopping it.
And tumble the box around. And if you can tumble the box around, then you can say, this thing's in this point, this thing's in this point, this thing's in this point, and you've got control over it. So I would not say that we need to ever limit ourselves.
The way I think of it, the way I draw perspective when I'm drawing like the figure, and I have all these boxes all over the place that are all tumbling, they're not in one like perfectly vertical, horizontal space. The way I think of it is every box has its own 3-point perspective.
That's right.
I don't, unless they are actually parallel, I won't even compare them in all those vanishing points. But also, I do think about how all of those things fit into one larger box and how the tapering of the whole might make them smaller as they go down that box.
Very good. So you got a big box for the environment. This is a basic of perspective. Environment is one thing, the setting that you are in. The other thing is the things in the setting. The things in there, they can tumble around on their own. Environments don't tend to tumble around. They stay put.
Unless it's like some action scene where the whole thing is like
Right,
rotated and we're like flying through the air.
And in most cases like that, it's not the environment spinning around, it's the camera.
Right.
But here's something that can help you with perspective, is 3D modeling. Learn to model environments and then move the camera around in the environment, and you'll notice how it's as if the environment was moving, but it isn't. Environment's staying still, so it's locked, but the perception of it changes. Then put things in the environment and spin them around and draw from them.
So, much simpler, cheaper way of trying to understand perspective. I am HO that I still need to implement myself. Go play Minecraft. No, I mean it though. Go play Minecraft. Go take a screenshot of anything you see. There's perspective right there for you. There are parallel lines for you to follow. It's just graph paper. Sir, yes, sir. Don't get caught playing too much Minecraft. Remember, don't boot up Minecraft as we speak. Use it for understanding perspective. Use it as a tool to understand how things recede in FOVs and all of that. But that's one way to do it. If you want to practice it, if you for some reason just don't want to practice from life, which I guess I understand, it might be hard, but that's one way to do it, and that's another way to make environments that you can draw in, that you can practice and study from. So just wanted to throw that out there.
3D program where you model environments and objects and you control a camera in there is the culmination of 600 years of perspective knowledge that now the computer does all this for us. But I think that it is valuable. When I was trying to learn perspective, I didn't have any access to 3D programs. 3D programs can be very useful with this.
You didn't have access, or they didn't exist?
Actually, they didn't exist for consumers, yeah. Old people jokes.
What do you think is the most commonly used method? It's not 1 point, maybe 2 or 3 point?
The most commonly used method by whom, though? By beginners. Beginners tend to follow rules of 1 point is easy. Write your name in big letters and then put a point back in the back and run lines back to it, and your name becomes three-dimensional. So it's common to start with 1 point. 2 and 3 point for people who are getting a little more advanced. But if you're asking me what's the most common for people who have mastered drawing, the most common is to be thinking less about 1, 2, and 3 point and saying, is this below me? If the camera's up here, the head is below me. If the camera's down here, the head is above me. If the camera is to one side, I see more of this side. So it's like what you were mentioning. It's like what Kim Jung-gi said. He just draws a box in the position he wants.
I guess let's just say the environment, because yeah, we can say everything within it could be tumbling and it's no longer fitting that perspective, and now we have a 50-point perspective. But let's just say for the environment, if you had to pick between 2, 3, and 5, what do you think? Like,
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
No.
God,
no.
Well, in our discussion 5, 6 years ago,
Yeah.
you did.
What did I say?
You said 2-point perspective is usually used because
Oh, because it's simple enough.
You said it's easier to explain.
Okay.
It gives the drawing a feeling of being grounded. And I don't remember how you explain that.
I know
Do you
that,
remember what-
yes.
Can you explain why is the 2-point perspective more
Because
grounded?
you've got one set that is not converging. It's just
The
staying
verticals.
vertical, for example. It doesn't have to be verticals, but it usually
Yeah.
is. Okay, so you got one set that's vertical. You've got a whole bunch of vertical lines all the way through this that give a certain unity of staying vertical. Everything that's standing goes the same direction, and it makes the ground plane easier to grip than when you've got a ground plane that's curving.
Right.
So yes, I can see why I said that.
Smart guy back then.
back then.
The verticals are a motif. The repeating verticals unite.
Yeah.
Who's the director that always puts those perfect verticals?
Is he a classic director? Wes Anderson does lots of things.
Wes,
Oh yeah.
Wes Anderson's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, yeah. He gets the camera very far back, so there's as little as perspective as possible. He uses the metaphor of they're like little dioramas.
But that flattens all the points, not just the vertical.
Yes, it does. But it makes it so that it's very flat and very accessible and very storybook-like. When we talk about using verticals as motifs, you don't find much three-point perspective in art previous to the 20th century. You do find it, but it's rare. And cameras back then, you know those view cameras that have the bellows where you tilt the back of the camera and all that?
No, I've never used
Oh,
that.
you look at those, you go look up Shorpy.com and look at some of those old photographs that were not on film, they were on big glass plates, and they'd take a picture of a city and every vertical is vertical. And they look great for that reason. But you take it with your cell phone, it's not going to look that way because those cameras were specially designed so that they would keep that vertical motif going on through there. So that
I actually learned. I took an art history course last semester. It was really tough. But I actually learned a bit about that plate camera technology. It's really interesting, actually, because those were printing your cameras, your photographs. Those weren't, I don't think they were even called photographs at the time. They were printed onto plates. They were very, very fragile. They were really, really hard to maintain. But this was early camera technology. And it's just really interesting to think about how far it's come. Those cameras were designed to, like what he said, the specific types of cameras were designed to maintain the verticals. And, you know, just what you're seeing. And then time went on, people kept looking at how a camera can produce things because cameras are just a snapshot of what's actually there. And it was really interesting seeing the history go through that. That's all. I just wanted to say that.
That's why I made the pitch for two. Earlier today, we recorded Rembert drawing in his sketchbook, and I asked if he was ever dependent on photographs, and he said he used to be. But I think he said something like, "But it bored him. It wasn't creative. He enjoyed more doing his own thing." And look at how he handles space, and you can say that is not what I would get from the camera. It would be impossible to get that from the camera, because he has control over distorting it so that the whole thing feels like a coherent design for the way he is bending the line. So he is anything but bound by it.
Yeah. You can stick to 3-point and tumble boxes, and you're still freeing yourself from what the camera's doing.
Being free means you can do what you choose, and it's helpful to have the tools. In learning perspective, learn the stuff that teachers tell you to learn, but then watch the masters who draw so freely and ask them how they do it. And so often you will find out that I just think of everything with a striped sock on it, and that little thing around it, that cross contour lets me know which part's closer. And then I can build it from there. But that is the great secret of drawing in perspective freely, is just to learn some simple forms. Cartoonists have been doing it for a long, long time. Learn that basic language of how a block and a cylinder and a cone and a sphere and a few other variations on that. Wrap lines around them, put them in any position you want, and then you've got control of space. So did we do okay?
I think we did great. That was Marshal Vandruff, ladies and gentlemen. Woo!
He actually has there's this portfolio video I was watching of this guy. When I was just going down a hole of these kind of videos, he's really interesting. Give it a watch. Marshal Vander portfolio. I'll put it up. I'm not gonna actually go through it. I'm just gonna say Uncle Vandruff. Sorry, Uncle Vandruff. Portfolio. And because he's an old person, he's been drawing forever. He has. I didn't finish this video either. But it's interesting to hear about how he survives through the industry, how he survived through the industry, and how he learned to just break down how this stuff works. Maybe at another time I put this on, this perspective for drawing anything. But we're just focused on breaking down things from a basic perspective. So like they were saying, an art teacher will tell you, you can use 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective as a starting point for understanding how the world works. But the masters do, they do just see the world in boxes and cylinders and tubes with contours. And that's how you learn to break those sort of things down. So I'd like to take a moment just to talk about perspective as applied to the figure in a slightly practical sense. I say practical, but that's like quotation marks. It's not necessarily like practical. It's just, how have I applied this sort of principle, or how can you even apply this sort of principle in your own art? So I'm going to show you, this is a study that I did last year. I found this person, this artist called Kiwi. They have a big following. I don't know how I only just saw them. I'm actually going to put them up on screen if I can remember how it goes. There they are. Don't judge me for this being the first thing you see. But they draw suggestive art. It happens. But I noticed in a lot of their art, there is a slight hint of perspective. What's the least booby art I can refer to here? This is the Android. No, this is Launch from Dragon Ball. There's a lot of perspective on display here. I broke this perspective down for myself to comprehend it, but you can see that like there is a lot of dynamics going on that transform how a drawing can look like. I've been called a fake fan in chat. Oh, it's all over. But this is okay, right? This is all right. You can have a straight on 1 point perspective drawing every now and again. And that's what a basic figure is. When you just see somebody drawing like a just standing there picture, that's 1 point perspective. Your horizon line is like somewhere around here, maybe even like around here. It's eye level. You can see the top of the shoulders, so that's how you know it's eye level. Or rather where the horizon line is. But there is a bit of dynamics going on here. And you can see cartoonists breaking it down. This is just a cylinder with contours. A cylinder with contours. A cylinder with contours. And so I took a second. I took a bit to break down how their art works because it's so interesting to me. Boobies aside. The boobies aside. It's really good boobies, but it's very interesting. And so I broke it down a bit for myself. Because it really wasn't until last year. I've been drawing. I'm 28 years old. I've been drawing all of my life. I understood on some level how perspective applies to a figure. And this is just a giant study file of other styles I like and I admire. This is line and rendering. This artist, this is Cafoon on Twitter. I don't remember what this one's URL is. I'm sorry. They don't have their signature in here. Or I accidentally cut it off for the sake of studying. But I thought it was cool. But in regards to perspective, I did all the studying to try and figure out, like, where's the perspective on this? Where is it? The horizon line is clearly somewhere all the way out there. But the reality was, I realized, to achieve this look, this is just as simple as breaking your figures down into boxes. Understanding how a box moves, how a box bends, how it shapes around. That's the reason why we began this workshop with perspective. because all that a person is a box in perspective. And that's really interesting to me. You can achieve really, really dynamic forms, really, really dynamic pieces. And one of these was this was the trace. This was me redoing it from scratch and just trying to hit a lot of highs that my inspirations were hitting. I think to some degree I might have gotten what I wanted, but I didn't. I haven't taken the time to really apply it back into my art because I got really busy. But yeah, you just see that when you're drawing people, when you're drawing characters, when you're drawing appealing things, you can apply perspective. You can break the world down into a 2 or 3 point perspective. Chat says we are all naught but boxes, and it's true. We really are. So that's what I wanted to express just by visiting that long perspective video. Are we going to do some perspective studies right now? That wasn't really the plan, but I just wanted to express that again. This is why we keep up our perspective studies. This is why we try to view the world in naught but boxes. Because aside from using boxes to draw cityscapes in perspective and all of that, you use it for so much more. You draw people. You draw how these shapes break apart. You understand intuitively that you'll understand intuitively over time that a picture is nothing but several box planes that are on their own perspective, but it's all in the service of understanding, like, this is the structure behind everything. You can give everything structure until you finally hit the point where you can start to see things without laying down all of this groundwork. When will you know you hit that point? When you're confident enough to not lay that stuff down anymore, or when you get tired of laying it all down. That's another thing. When you hit the point where you're like, I don't want to put down my horizon line, these orthogonals, this box in this shape, and you hit that point, that's when you can let it go. But not because of laziness, not because you don't want to do it anymore. And maybe laziness is a bit of a contributor to it. But if you're drawing things that look fine, even without having to apply this structure, that's when you know you've hit the next level in your art. It's not an easy 2-mark point, but hello, my brother's at my window again. My brother's trying to poach a wild cat and bring it to our side. A lot of the cats around our neighborhood, they tend to frequent the neighbor's house and then our house as a result, because it's right next to where their food source usually is. But what was I saying? Learn to see the world in boxes. Learn to be able to understand how perspective works, and you'll achieve naturally dynamic and appealing works of art. So we're not spending some time doing perspective. I advise you to, if you're going to practice perspective, look from life, play Minecraft, any other game where you think that's an interesting perspective, let me study that. You learn to see your world like that, and then break that world down. Those are good ways to practice making more appealing art. So let's move on to the next video. Actually, let's take 5. Give your brain some room to breathe. This has been a long section. When you combine it with the homework, I kind of just went straight into it from the homework. So I'll give you all a small 2-minute window to just like stop and breathe, think about things, drink this in. Once again, this is. Let me open that drawing. At QE. This is their URL. Yes. On Twitter. Want to put that on there? So I'll leave this up for... Where's my 0? Control 0. I'm going to use the bathroom. So, take a breather. Soak it in. Think about how you can heighten your understanding of perspective from here. And practice it. And we'll be back with the next section when I'm back. All right. New chatter. I can tell they haven't been here this entire time. Too busy watching Nimmy Nightmare. Hi, we're back. I've been over... watched a video on perspective. I'm calling out this chatter because I know exactly where they were this entire time. But we watched a video on perspective. Basically, the secret to perspective is that you see things... you have to see the world in boxes. You have to see the world in boxes. You look at it. You learn to... once you understand, once you grasp what 2-point, 3-point, 1-point perspective is, you transfer that into just how you see the world in a box. And I went over some artists. Well, an artist I really admire their seeming just like natural grasp on 3-point perspective, and I wanted to show the study that I did before of their art, and a couple other artists that I admire. Again, Kafun. I don't want to show too much Kafun art because there's so much booby in there. But Chatter says you just got tired. Yeah, well. Anyways, watch the VOD later if you really want to watch that video, or look in the link of the VOD. Look in the description of the VOD. I'll link to the video that's in there. Professor is gooning in class. Wrong. It's against TOS to goon on chat. Or to goon on stream. But actually, I want to go over just one more other artist. I really like this artist. Their name's Orlek. I keep meaning to subscribe to their Patreon. But they also kind of got a grasp on how to break the world down into shapes. They started doing more pinup stuff in the last year. But I knew their stuff like way before then. I'm going to be a little bit of a hipster about it. But they kind of got a grasp on how to make something appealing. This isn't exactly a good thing, but there is a bit of natural perspective. This person just pointed up. Can't really tell, but I know it's there. Here too, a little bit of a grasp of perspective. Boxes, bro. Boxes. If you don't understand how to draw anything, break it down into a box. These scenery drawings that he does, I love them. They're full of so much whimsy. They're full of so much life. And it's like, it's really, it's uncanny. How many principles are packed into his piece of art that they're not really noticeable. Like here's the ground plane. It's all looking up. We aren't seeing the top of anything. It's so well developed. And the whole point of art like this, you don't even realize just how much is being like hidden away inside of it. And Pokemon, it's cool. I like Orlek's art a lot. They do a lot with deep 1-point perspective. You love the geometry in the background. That's awesome. It really is. Like Orlek is such a good artist. And also they're a good pinup artist. But I really like their Safe for Work stuff a lot. I admire what they do. It's so second nature to the artist that you almost don't notice. This is true. I saw Kraid. Yeah! Look at that! Look, Kraid? You can turn Kraid into a box. But he's also just like a big circle. There's a big round plane going up the top. Samus herself, full of boxes. Everything is just geometry is so cool. This artist is so good. And when you don't even notice all of the awesome that they do, it's cool. So, like, if you have a favorite artist, analyze their stuff. Analyze what they do. Like, even the stuff that's kind of low-key. You just got to see what they do. This is a cool 1-point perspective. Majora, yes, they did Majora's Mask. They do a lot of things, primarily Nintendo stuff, but it's all so appealing. It's also cool. I want to hit this point. I want to hit this point with my art. So, Kiwi, awesome. Orlek, awesome. Kafun, do I dare? Check Kafun's art. For 1 second while I get TOS'd. We're not going to keep this on there. But it's cool. So, that's it for reviewing perspective. We're going to go on to checking in a different window on stream. On stream, we're not looking at it on stream. But let's move on to the next point. We're going to review shapes. So I have people who are catching up on the workshop presently, and they told me, yeah, the shapes, they kind of kicked my ass. It was really hard to try and see the world geometrically, or just how to break down people into shapes. I wish I had seen this video before I started the workshop. I would have shown it then, but we have this day now where we're looking back on stuff, so I'd like to show it. This is The Secret of Simple Forms by Proco. And let's get into it. It's a 9-minute long video, slightly less because there's an outro. It's hosted by Marshal Vandruff, the same grandpa we just talked about perspective with. Very, very fascinating insight. He said pretty much break the world down into boxes. And if you really want to keep things simple, break the world down into 2-point perspective. Break your compositions down into 2-point perspective. Don't necessarily always do that. Practice more forms of perspective. But that's one thing you can do. When you become a master, when perspective becomes second nature to you, that's when you start throwing away some things, like what me and Mr. Allard did. Reviewed the homework earlier. Saying that again for anyone new. But let's get into this.
Last lesson, we learned that there are multiple ways to create the illusion.
I just want to let's just talk about this a little bit. These are perspective tricks. Foreshortening. This is just foreshortening is diminution. What a hard word to say. In perspective, with contours. Sometimes with contours. So that's cool. Depth tricks. Keep these in your back pocket. These are simple tricks.
Some easy, some not.
There's that.
Let's solve them all with a single skill. 2 of our illusionary tricks are easy. Overlap, super simple. Atmosphere, things fade into the background. No brainer. 3 of the secrets take study and practice.
Yes.
Foreshortening. It's not as easy as it doesn't look. Beginners seldom dare. Diminution. Easy to estimate when we don't need to get it exact. Less easy when we want it exact.
Glass windows on a building. This is one example of how this works. But it's really hard. This is just one trick. I believe we talked about this before, way earlier. But I think it was Mr. Allard showed their art she just showed me what she did. She didn't let me put it on stream. But if you're making a certain shape, like circles, in perspective, you can make a box with an X, and this helps dictate how the curves of your shape should be made. So let's continue.
And convergence to vanishing points. Not hard to know they exist. Not always easy to know where they are.
Once again, for anyone just joining, not to make it sound like I'm just pointing at one person, but the reality of perspective is there are many vanishing points in what you see. But not everyone in the world is making a piece that is describing directly to these vanishing points. They're not all setting up these crazy 7 different vanishing points. You're not always doing that. The secret to that is just making a box and learning how boxes converge. Moving on.
Foreshortening, well-placed vanishing points, and precise shrinking in the distance are difficult skills, but we shall pursue them, and this lesson's project will show you why. It points to one major skill that solves all of those problems once you've mastered it. It is reducing a complex form into a simple one that you can draw into any position. That is the skill. If your goal is to not have to copy, but to look, then reinvent your image, here's how you won't learn to do that. Draw an object. Copy what you see. Take pains to get it exact. Get it exact. Put in detail. Lots of detail. Make sure you don't miss any detail. Now, draw it again in a different position without looking at the object in that position. Make it up. Can't do it? Here is the lesson. Copying may help you notice detail, but it won't help you redraw the thing with the detail into another position. That takes skill with form. Let me show you how we learn to do that. Draw an object as simplified form, a box for example. Then, in another position, draw the box again. Now we have line systems. Those are the secret. They will take time. Here is the thing. We can't reposition until we establish a structure. Once we position a box, its 3 line systems solve all other lines. This is a secret that many don't know. Most of this course is about that and how to apply it to things and to settings. Settings have line systems. Right-angled streets, for example. Streets are not objects so much as environments, where lines may mean long distances, even a journey. We'll get to settings after we've learned to draw objects. They have lots in common. Big settings often have big diminution, but so do small objects seen by small creatures. Up close. Big or small, it's the same set of principles. And I must warn you, even though we'll start with objects before we get to environments, some objects are difficult. Objects with lots of parts, ins and outs, lots of oblique angles.
This drawing is by a man named Matthew Cook. Can't see it because my footer hides it, obscures it. I don't know who Matthew Cook is, but wherever they got these from, props to Matthew Cook.
These are too much for beginners.
Yes.
The same with anatomy. Hands, for example, are complex objects, 16 forms.
This is by?
Example for beginners.
Yeah, okay.
Lots of oblique angles. These are too much for beginners. The same with anatomy. Hands, for example, are complex objects, 16 forms, movable, not for beginners. Skeletal studies, turning the bones into 3D components. Such things are for artists who know this already, aspire to this. That's where we're going, but don't start there. The same with any organic forms. Animal bodies, muscle masses. Hang in there for that. Before we learn complex organic forms, we learn simple, blocky ones. Now for the project. Challenge yourself. See if you need perspective. Choose something worthy to study. Place it in 3/4 view. Draw it as if it were boxed. Don't put in detail. Even if you love detail, go for the form. Now, draw it again in another position. Looks so easy. You can draw from real-life objects, or from other drawings, or photos. That's fine. No cheating that way. You have to invent when you can't see the other position. Anything, really. But if you're new to this, choose a thing that is already simplified, already boxy. It may seem boring as form, perhaps, but it will make the point. Drawing something simple into imaginary positions prepares you to do this with anything drawable. When you advance, you will use multiple forms: blocks, wedges, cylinders, toruses, spheres. Let's look at spheres for a moment. Spheres as forms. This is a circle in circles, and a sphere in circles. So is this. Sort of. This is a sphere in a sphere. So is this. Sort of. Spheres are such simple forms and so appealing you may be tempted to start with them, and some people do. Andrew Loomis taught cartoonists to invent heads by reducing them to simplified spheres. But two things to know in advance about spheres. One is that placing ellipses on spheres precisely is very advanced, more difficult than you may think. But the good news is, placing them not so precisely is easy. In Premium, I'll teach you something like spheres, but much looser to start. The other thing is that accurate ellipses on spheres come from knowing accurate lines on boxes, more than I want to explain here. But I'll give you beginner-friendly versions in Premium. I will introduce you to a freehand way to begin a form drawing that I call the blob approach. The blob approach? The blob approach. A very simplified method of drawing a form from a shape with a cross contour line, or two, or three. That gets us started. Then we can work as much as we like on refining it. This is a challenging human activity exclusive to mammals with prefrontal cortexes. Figure it out if you can. I'm here to help, but before you watch me draw this, I recommend that you try it yourself. That preps you for it.
We're just going to watch him do it.
It may look logical when you see it demoed, and it is logical, but if you haven't studied the logic, you'll find it more difficult than you expect. If, however, you have learned the forms, try your redrawings in several varied positions. It may inspire others and display your skill. If you draw something worth sharing in our community, it shall be seen. If it's something worth showcasing, you shall be celebrated. First, simplify. Understand it as form. Then draw another position. That is not copying. That is creating. This is your challenge. It takes some thought, and it is the test to see if you need it or not. Now, to reiterate, choose what you'll draw. I recommend something boxy. Start with a blob to decide your direction. Using that blob as a base, sculpt out a simplified version. Then draw that blob in a different position. Repeat. Do that at least 3 times, daring with different positions. Post your results at this lesson on Proco.com, and I'll show you how to approach this in detail in Premium at Proco.com/perspective. In our next free lessons, we'll study the science of how all this form business works. Orthos, axes, eye levels, picture planes. And in Premium, the blob approach, cartoons, airplanes, and much more.
Letting their advertisement play out. Right. So, really wish I had shown this at the very beginning. I'm contemplating whether I want to make everyone do this as a as an exercise we all do together right now. We might not need to, honestly. Robot dinosaurs. But tell me, chat, how did you feel watching that? And it's just expanding on all that talk from the last video about seeing the world in simple shapes. If you did the exercises from the first week, breaking an animal down into geometric shapes, do you understand better now how to do that? Like, what exactly I was actually looking for? I think I have already expanded on what I was hoping people would do, but this just explains it more. Make more boxes. Make more boxes. Start things as a box, and then you can add more detail. Chat says, definitely feel the need to put this into practice. You need to return to shapes. Truth. Speak those facts. Took a swig of water. Yes, I agree. Which is why we do what we do in this workshop. You like this method a lot, you think? Awesome. Yeah. So let me think. What's our next move here? It'll help you more than making everything exclusively boxy. Well, that's good. Once again, starting at boxes. That's the key. Is there anything on that isn't about boxes? Boxing. Punk, punk, punk. All right. Let's see. My lesson plan for today was a little bit more freeform, but I would like us to wrap back around to proportion. I'd like us to review the cranial head method. We'll try it again on something that's like a little bit more easier to handle. And I'm still trying to determine, do I need to do? No, we don't need to do the exercise listed here. You can on your own time. Once again, the VOD will have a link to this video. It'll be at the timestamp, but it'll still link directly to it, so you can review this as you will. And you can see in my in my stuff, Proco 11 head, proportion, how to use the cranial head method. I was trying to find literally anything that better describes using the skull, using the cranial head method to draw. I got massage stuff. Unfortunately, no, that's not what we're looking for. However, there was something I saw. I saw a video talking a bit about the 7.5 method, and I think the way that guy was talking about it might have been a little bit it might help us understand 7.5 heads better than before. So I want to put that video on, and we'll do some drawing together just to reinforce it. When my new window like to load, I'm going to go into my video history, and I don't want anyone to see it. I watched this video. It's called Master Proportions in Figure Drawing with Glen Vilppu. It's another grandpa. He has a much scratchier voice. This is a much longer video. I'm gonna kind of skip around. I'm gonna put it on quick. I don't know if they'll get me for showing this as opposed to Proco, because this is kind of like these guys are they want money. Proco wants money, but this is a free video available online, so hopefully I don't get caught for sharing free resources online. I don't even take compensation for doing this workshop, so you know. But let's and I hope I don't get dinged. I hope I don't get dinged. This guy is wearing underwear. You can't see anything. Any YouTube video should be free game. That's what we all think. And then stuff happens. So let's get to here. YouTube React channels get away with so much worse. Yeah. You know what? You're right. So let's get into this. He's going to be talking about the 7.5 head method. And hopefully the way he describes it makes a bit more sense. Then we'll get in. We'll draw it out a bit. React videos are monetized? Yeah, they suck.
Basic approaches. Generally speaking, in almost all your anatomy books that you see, people use 8 heads high figures. Okay? In other words, where you have basic proportions.
There was actually another video I wanted to watch. It was about, did I leave it in here? I might have forgotten to leave it in my notepad, but I'll put it on after this, so that everyone can have just another. It's another part of the review, another part of having more tools that'll help you understand how to do things. So, one of the things this guy is about to do, he'll explain it actually.
Breaking it down. So, and here I'll break this. So the head size then corresponding to this. Now I use a little different system. Okay, that proportion right there, 8 heads high is actually not really normal. Standard human proportions are more closer to 7.5 to 7 3/4. So I just break this off. But this becomes a convenient means of taking and starting out.
I'm getting the URL to put this on my notepad. But I don't know if he's actually like gonna be talking about it. Sorry, I'm writing this down in my notepad. Glen Vilppu. Sorry, Mr. Glen Vilppu, to pronounce it like that. But basically what he does, that I really should have mentioned earlier, he'll draw his line. I drew a line as well. But he drew the line and he broke it down into forts. Because, again, this discusses the 8-head method. And 8 heads are really easy to break down into forts. Your head will break down into a fourth. And then he basically just keeps going down. He measures the halfway points of the head, which, incidentally, match up really well with the cranial head method. So that's another way of measuring stuff.
So if I take and put a mark at the top, a mark at the bottom, and then take and break that in half, and break that in half again, and break that in half. This gives me a rough head size.
And the main reason he's just doing it to the upper body, that's where a lot of your pinpoints are. That's where a lot of landmarks are in the body. And it gets you up to that head measurement sooner. And legs, this guy is standing bow-legged, but they can be in like a variety of different poses. The torso, when you're studying it like this, stands straight up like a tree. Some trees aren't straight up, but you know what I mean. Chat says this old man just can't stop breaking people in half. Breaking it in half the same way you break a cracker in half.
This point here,
pieces.
This halfway point being the pubic arch. And then of course here I would break this in half. The halfway part here then becomes the knees. There.
And all he did, pardon that clicking, I know there's someone in chat who doesn't like clicking. Bad with clicking rather. Not dislikes it. But this guy, once again, you got the 8 heads, chopped it down, and then just sort of, when you look at that last remaining like half of it, you just shaved off about 3/4 of that final remaining thing bit. Chat. Arrow dies. Sorry, very sorry. Couldn't control him here.
Now, if we're taking this proportion here to start with.
And once again, after he subtracts that final like fourth where it would be, you can break it down into fourths again, and then you cut off that last little fourth right there. That's one way you could do it. We'll go over this later when I draw it myself. But he starts his halfway point from the new mark where the foot would be, measuring 7.5 heads in height.
Okay, let me take and break the head down here. We're starting out with the head here. Okay, the general proportions now. And everybody is pretty much the same. Eyes are in the center. Brow line is a little bit above that. So this is halfway. Brow, you just have to learn to see that. The distance between the chin and the brow, halfway is the bottom of the nose. So that's another halfway proportion.
So that's just it's really funny that he says you just gotta find the brow line, which I mean I guess, pardon me, it's true the brow line might vary like slightly depending on like how big your forehead is, but like most skulls are kind of similar. But this is just a system of halves. How one thing relates to another, how big one thing relates to another, that's proportion. So the distance of your brow to your nose, that's a halfway length. That's a half head height. Something to keep in mind.
Then we have the bottom of the lower lip, not the opening of the mouth. The opening of the mouth is above that. Now, the opening of the mouth corresponds to the corner of the jaw. Coming down, the ear corresponds to the line of the brow to the bottom of the nose. Now, the front of the head, and if you take and look at our lessons dealing with the head, you will see that the back of the head is wider than the front. And the width of the head now corresponds to the distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the nose. So in other words, what we have here then is roughly a square. Okay, that proportion, the width of the head, or the distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the nose, becomes our sort of standard measurement that we work with. This same proportion now will correspond to the distance to the pit of the neck. So at this point now we have the ports set up. So if I start out with what I have here, I go through eyes, brow, halfway, bottom of the nose, this proportion then taking and fitting to the pit of the neck. Okay, now, as we were talking about the anatomy or the rib cage, we saw that the rib cage is high and back. Also, I mentioned the proportions from the pit of the neck to the top of the head is equal. This distance here is equal to the bottom of the 10th rib. So we're talking about the rib cage. Half of that distance, in other words, the same proportion that we're talking about from the bottom of the nose to the pit of the neck coming down is where the cartilage attaches on the thoracic arch. And then these become the bottom of the rib cage, 10th rib, not the actual bottom. The rib cage is high and back, so we're coming down and we're digging and working through the proportions here. Now, I mentioned the difference between male and female is that the male thoracic arch is more of a triangle. Female is slightly narrower, more like 60 degrees. One is 90 to 60. Okay, the distance from
Maybe
here
not exactly that,
to the end of the iliac crest is the end of the pubic arch. In other words, the corners of the pelvis. Half of that distance takes us to the pubic arch. In other words, you can see this distance here, half of our standard measurement is taking us to the pubic arch. Okay, this is equivalent, this point here now is equivalent to 4 heads. Okay? Now, the same measurement that we've been talking about, this measurement, top of the head to the bottom of the nose, corresponds to the end of the clavicle. In other words, remembering the clavicle is an S curve coming through. Okay? The scapula comes out beyond that. And as we take down to the knees here, the trochanter, your hip bone, now is going to take and corresponds roughly with your pubic arch, and the leg is now going at a diagonal. Remember that this joint is not at right angles. This is squared so that the leg, the knees come forward at an angle, and then we come down to the wrist. Now, your elbow will take and correspond to your waist. So as we're coming out of the glenoid cavity of the scapula, coming down here. Now, the wrist corresponds to the pubic arch. Now, if you notice as you bend your arm that the wrist, this distance here to here, is quite short. It doesn't come up to where your shoulder joint is here, the glenoid cavity at the end of the humerus. Okay, so then the hand itself is equal to what we refer to as the face, which we take and break the head down into roughly quarters. You would find that where you have the theoretical hairline.
It's really messed up how measurements of the arm, they're not perfect. They're really hard to get perfect. And that measuring the arm generally tends to start outside of the shoulder. But But again, this is just measuring things ideally. There will be variations. There are people out there whose wrists don't align with their pubic arch. There are people with really long arms. And it's really funny too. What is this? Oh, this Northern Lions. This emo came out a little weird on my end. But it's funny to think about that. In proportion, your upper arm, I can never remember what that's actually called. This looks like it should be longer than this whole section. It did not add your line break. That's messed up. It looks like it should be longer in theory, but then you look at a real person and the person's upper arm, this looks shorter compared to the rest of their forearm. And I've generally noticed this to be the truth. But it could be that it's because the shoulder is involved there and the wrist is like all crazy, and it might not even be including the joint. So from this perspective, it looks like the upper arm is shorter. But I'll let it keep going. I don't want to keep breaking this up too long. But halves, head quarters. Your head is literally the basis for how everything is measured on the body. So I'll back it up just a little bit.
Where you have the theoretical hairline. So the hand is the face. Now, the foot, the size of the foot is, now of course it varies with one person to another, but the foot is basically the same size as the head. And the hand, if we take the foot, the shape of the foot, coming out this way, you'll find that your hand will fit from the arch to the end of the big toe.
That's an interesting way to do it.
These are
I've never
all
done it
very,
like
very,
that.
very common proportions. Now, the back is actually the same thing now. If we take and look at the rib cage, say from the top, we see that the rib cage is shaped.
This is
It's quite
spine,
horizontal, this way. Now the scapulas, let's just take and create a line here where the pit of the neck would be. Notice I'm drawing this considerably smaller. The rib cage is tiny at the top. Okay, now clavicle is this S curve that goes around. The scapula now is coming across the back, and it's on this curved surface and coming off out here. And I've mentioned about the fact that this is a squared off corner coming back into that. Okay, the scapula from the back, and I'm just going to superimpose this over the front here, is that the scapula is going off, and the length of the scapula is equal to the clavicle, but since it's going around a curved surface, we're going to find a gap from the center of the spine to where the scapula begins.
It's okay if this isn't like
So this is
register
a
at
change
all.
in here. The bottom, and it lines up pretty much with the pit of the neck. The base of the scapula is coming to where the sternum, not the end of the xeocoid process, but where the cartilage actually attaches. So this line here, and it's not a perfect straight right angle, it's slightly moved out. So these points here, but these are the same measurement essentially as the distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the nose. So the clavicle, scapula, in both ways come through, and we come down to the end, the iliac crest. Now, what happens? Let's look at the proportion. Let's look at this in profile, because this is not actually what we see. What we see is something quite different. In other words, if I take and draw the pelvis in profile, here's the end of the iliac crest, the points and the dimples in the back, pubic arch coming down here, and the choroid process, remembering all these names, never do. Okay, ischiotuberosity in the back here. Okay, this point here, okay, these tend to line up and through here. you have the spine coming across at an angle here. Okay. The muscles of the stomach are taking and coming down and attaching to the pubic arch. But that actually is not what we see. In other words, the muscles are coming down and attaching at this point right here. Okay, what happens is that we have a fat pads, and the body has many fat pads all over it. But right at this point, both male and female, you have a fat pad that goes down through here. In other words, the fat pad is filling up the space right here. Both male and female genitals are coming from the underside. They're down here. Okay, this is where things. So what we see is a distance like this. We see this triangular shape, generally, both male and female, coming down this way. So this is a misleading proportion. The pubic arch is in here, not down here. And so you're looking at that point. And in talking about the anatomy and talking about where you take and bend your leg, that here's your end of your pelvis. The leg, when you bend it, I was just going to take and add a bending leg, say coming out and drawing this as a cylinder. The bend takes place where the bone here is. That's where the change is. This is now is taking that leg, if it was going out, would be bending at this point. So from here to there, you have a basic 3-finger gap. So this is a point that is often a mistake that many beginning students, most beginning students, they think of the leg as being attached to the end of the pelvis up here. It's not. The leg, if we bend the leg coming across here, we would find that all of the muscles that are on here are taking and attaching to the bone itself or going inside here. What we have happening coming from up here are 2 primary muscles, a tensor and a sartorius muscle that are taking, but those are the straight line that we see on the model and profile. So that gives us the essence now of our basic proportions that we're looking at.
So, sorry, really, really long video. I understand if you might have just started to zone out during that. I know the guy is kind of dry as well. But I think it did honestly describe a lot of things that you need to understand going through your figure drawing, through your proportionate drawing. There's just one more video I'd like to show that will be of help to us. I'm going to add it to my notepad. I don't know if I showed this. I don't think I did. I think I thought about showing it. But as far as reviewing things go, it will be of help. We're only going to do some of this. Not the full video. Because I'm pretty sure we're all kind of tired of looking at stuff. So I just want to... I thought there was another... Is this the right video that I'm looking at? This might not be the video I am thinking of. I'm thinking of... This is a different video I watched on my own. Drawing, measuring. Might be this. Don't know if I put this on. This is the video that got me slammed, I believe. Because it didn't have underwear. This one doesn't have captions either. So you're gonna have to listen along. But we're gonna get right into this one. This is measuring relationships.
Measuring relationships. The approach I'm showing today involves measuring relationships to make the composition fit on the size surface you're working on. We've established that the pose is 7.5
I was afraid that butt would
heads
be
tall.
on screen too long.
The size of your paper allows the pose to be about this big. So mark the top and the bottom. Then break it up into 7.5 units.
Or 8.
That tells you how big the head should be on
you
the
cut off a bit.
page. And you have the points for all the places where the head units lie on the pose. Doing this helps to prevent one of the most common rookie mistakes.
I feel like I need a silly sensor, you know? Hold on. Hold on. Cause now I'm terrified. I'm like, oh no. Did you guys you might not have. There's this tweet I saw today. It's of this big titty VTuber. And she was like, ugh, I accidentally showed my cleavage. The cleavage of my model. She's insane. It's the I hope you're watching me for my personality type that post. But she accidentally zoomed in on her cleavage for 5 seconds and she got wiped for it. It really, really ticked her off. I don't blame her. It's, anyway, hold on. I hope you guys are following me for my opinions and jokes. Yeah. Here. We have Pepino here to save the day just in case. Her model does have boobs bigger than her head. It's true. It's crazy. So let me just set up our Pepino really fast. Sorry. And let's keep going.
Progressively drawing things bigger as you go down the page or smaller as you go down the page.
Sorry, let me actually back that up a little bit. We got distracted by Pepino.
The points for all the places where the head units lie on the pose. Doing this helps to prevent one of the most common rookie mistakes. Progressively drawing things bigger as you go down the page or smaller as you go down the page. This happens because we get tunnel vision. We focus on the small portion of the drawing we're currently working on. We relate things only to the things near them instead of the whole picture. And if we tend to measure things slightly bigger than they really are, the drawing will slowly get bigger and bigger as we work our way down the page. Relating the whole thing first is a way to step back and look at the big picture.
I'm guilty of this, by the way. I'm very guilty of doing this, especially when I'm drawing from sight and without laying down any structure. It tends to happen a lot. That sound is just a stretching sound. It's just like a rubber thing. Moonlight Mistral Art in chat says, same. That's how you get the long legs. It happens. That's a lot. We got to remember to relate things to the head, rather. So
make sure the foundation works before we add the parts.
Yay!
Already, this tells us a lot, and it makes measuring the rest of the figure much easier. We can also rotate the head unit horizontally and do the same thing for the width of the pose. Notice how in this pose, the head is closer to the left side. Avoid putting it in the exact center by default, since that could create an unbalanced composition.
And this is when you're drawing real things. That's what he's advising. You don't necessarily put the head in the middle. This is just your measuring system going on.
Think about the placement of the drawing vertically and horizontally. At this point, you could also find the center point of the pose by dividing the height and width in half. Then find where that center point is on the model. In this pose, the center point is about here in his right glute. Shapes and angles. With the head units in place, we can start drawing in the shapes. Start with the largest shapes and use simple lines. The largest shape we can use is what's called the envelope. Use large angles connecting the outside points of the whole pose. Imagine if the pose was gift wrapped. Doing this allows you to look at the big picture and establish its perimeter. Everything else should fit inside this shape. Now start observing the next largest shape along the body. Focus on getting the angles right with simple gesture lines. Remember that a gesture line can be either a straight line, C-curve, or S-curve. It should capture the motion of the form. This allows you to get the big picture working without committing to any details. You can easily make corrections as you go. Once you
And another thing about, laying everything down instead of using the head measuring. Instead of trying to measure with your heads, like I was mistakenly trying to advise everyone to do these last couple weeks, putting down that rough line guide, using that broken down line, it helps a lot more to keep it all straight. So that's my apologies for misleading everyone.
Start adding subtleties in the contours, it's less likely that you'll change things. And if you do, it's more time consuming because you have to redo all the details. So keep it simple, stupid, and worry only about the major relationships at first. It's also a good idea to keep your lines thin and light. Most of these initial construction lines will need to be erased later. So if you
Professor was wrong on the internet. Death. Yeah.
you draw dark, thick lines, you'll end up with a very messy drawing. Though we are drawing gesture lines here, it's a bit different from the 30-second to 5-minute quick sketches we did in the beginning of this course. In the quick sketches, we were not too concerned about the proportions, only the motion and the energy. It's hard to get accurate proportions in a 30-second sketch. In this lesson, we are much more concerned about proportions. As a result, we will lose some gesture because we're not exaggerating as much, or not at all. It's a side effect of careful measuring. Usually, my goal is to construct accurately while capturing as much gesture as possible. Plumb lines.
We're not going to go over this one. We're not going to go over everything actually in this. But those were the main two techniques I wanted to share. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to make people pull out their pens at near 10 in the evening, depending on where you are in the world. We're going to do a figure drawing together. Not a gesture drawing, a figure drawing. So let me take a moment. I'm gonna find a gesture draw party. 6 to 9 p.m. in America. Yeah, we're making people pick up their pens at 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. in America. Or never you're looking at these. But I'm gonna shop around for a bit for a good pose everyone can work from. Yoji Lau. Let's actually look through his stuff. I like when Mr. Liao is on display because he has very good form. He's a very good form to study from. And we're gonna instead of a gesture draw party. Well, we'll warm up a little bit actually with the gesture draw party. We'll warm up with some gestures, but then we're gonna do a 15-minute figure drawing, in proportion. So, we'll see where that goes. So, pardon me. I'm just shopping around. Is this good? It might be. It might work for what we need. I skipped over the plumb line part of that video, but the long and skinny of it is that you pretty much drop a straight vertical line down from the tallest point of the figure to the lowest point of the video, or of the figure. And that's how you do it. And the tallest point is not necessarily at the center of the head, which is where you would be making that like long vertical line to measure things up with anyway. But that's how that would work. That's what I advise doing. Oh, well, draw along with me as we do that figure drawing. I'm not sure I'll time it actually. I might not time that. Because the intent is that we're all doing that together to grasp the anatomy. So, get your pencils out. We're going to do some figure drawing. And then once we're done with that, once we're all a little loosened up, we are going to do the figure drawing. So I'm not putting my thing on yet. I'm not putting my Clip Studio on. I'd like to grasp his anatomy. Yes, I would like to touch him, but it's inappropriate to touch the model. Gosh. I don't like Gesture Draw Party's intro music, actually. I think it's kind of... It's really loud. It's really, like... I don't know. It hits a frequency I'm not super into. So anyway, let's get into it. We're gonna do the 5 1-minute poses. Start. You can hear the the timer now today. Oh, he's got his arms out. So use as few lines as you can to express the gesture here. Find your lines of actions to warm up. So on and so forth. And try to avoid Control-Zing if you're doing on digital. Use your eraser to backtrack through what you've made. And if you have time, do a bean. He doesn't have a very interesting bean to do here, but if he does, try drawing one. And remember, draw overlap. Show me where the tight part is and where the pinch is. So here is perfect for studying a bean. I'm drawing shoulders and his hips. Remember, draw them not straight on with the canvas. Don't draw them just straight horizontal. Draw them receding. Draw them at a slight angle. Just gonna put down these lines. I'm gonna do a bean. We can compare notes at the very end. But there is a bit of a twist going on through that torso. Keep that in mind. Don't strike me, Twitch. Don't strike me. Hold on, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. We're just gonna put Peppino back on. Sorry if it obscures his gesture a bit, but it's a necessary evil. This dude looks like Dionysus Hades' game. True. So once again, look for your lines of action. Sit down, a shoulder, and a hip. I'm describing my actions. And then work in other areas that you're looking at. And draw a bean at the very end if you have time. Or if the model is doing something deserving of a bean that you think you can learn from. And if you have time at the very end, just draw a right angle for the chin to indicate where they're looking. The music is a bit too loud to hear me. Pardon. Line of action. Use a C or a straight for your hips and shoulders. Draw a bean if you need to. He's actually got a really interesting bean. So his line of action is like curving towards the right, but his torso is slightly twisted, slightly leaning to the left, which is fascinating to me. that I have a lot of time to admire that, because there's 30 seconds, 20 seconds left on the clock. All right, and on to our last pose. Oh, what a fun. He's doing a kneeling, slightly kneeling pose. Big C curve. Big line of action C curve. If you really so wish, his hips are kind of aligning with his thigh there. Same for just his legs in general. There's a very fluid motion pulling through this whole pose. Wow. There's a slight twist in his torso, because he's turning back. When that happens, remember one side faces over the other. They don't both overlap the same way when you're doing a twist. All right, pencils down. That's it for our gesture. That's it for our warm-ups. How did you feel? Maybe that's actually a more stable pose for us to reference from. Smile emoji. That's how you felt? Smile emoji? We'll do this pose actually for our figure drawing. It went, oh, oop. Yeah, there we go. Eh, where's the window? Where's the window? Hi. There it is. I should really set up a window just for the figure. Can't believe you're making me do another one of these videos today. Hey, I said the other homework was not due until Thursday. If you thought I wasn't going to make you do this figure drawing, where do you think we are? All right, so here's mine. First one kind of sucks, in all honesty. It was such a simple pose, but I tried to pull out more gesture in it. I was a little more warmed up. I haven't drawn today at all. But here's how mine came out. They're a little... They got bigger. I filled the canvas more. But if you already did your figure drawing for today, I hope you had a good, productive rest of your day. But we're going to now break this down. Break Mr. Yoji Lao. Yoji Lao. I really wish I knew how to pronounce his name. Give me a pronunciation guide, just to draw party. Using the 8-head method, which is technically the 7.5-head method, which with the one we went over, through the long, raspy, through Mr. Vilppu, Professor Vilppu. He hasn't lived that long to not be called Professor Vilppu. We're going to do that through his method. So let's look at here. We will make a straight line. Feel free to use a ruler if you're doing this on Professor... God dang it, I read chat. If you're doing this on traditional media, use a ruler if you really want to. Or learn how to do it by hand. But we'll set this up and we'll break this down into halves. I'm gonna do this by sight, breaking it down in half. I could be wrong, but this line, use feel free to use the. Make sure your canvas, if you're doing this digitally, make sure your canvas is at one consistent resolution while you do this. Otherwise, you're going to mess up the relative measurements of everything. So what I'm doing right now, I'm using the sight method. I'm trying to keep my pen and my thumb at a consistent height. I'm finding where the middle is. I think the middle is somewhere around here. And then I'll break it down into halves, take these into quarters. No, that's off. That's a little off. Like right around here, I believe. And then we'll break this down even more. I'll break these fourths into eighths. Fourths into eighths. And then 3/4 of the way down on this one ish. This lets us have 7.5 heads. So we'll combine everything that we've been going over. And we're not drawing. We're not drawing the straightforward. We're drawing Mr. Yoji Lau on the left. So we've got our relative proportions. It wasn't your imagination. This guy has short legs. He looks like he has short legs. Remember, all of our legs are a lot stubbier than we think they are. But I'll put mine off to the side. If you drew yours dead in the center, I apologize for not saying don't draw it in the center. But when you put it off to the side, it lets you draw a line across to see roughly where things ought to go. So I'm going to draw just a loose gesture of how things go together, while also keeping in mind our measurement system. So I'll do that. And for the sake of instructions purposes, I'm using the line tool. I'm putting these across, and you can see I am not. Maybe I am. I'm a little bit off, and you know what? That's human. That's human to err is to human. It happens. I'm just gonna put another half line through there. You don't have to do this. You can if you want. If you think it helps you. I'm doing this to make sure that I've got a good tool to be referencing from. So, again, we'll note. I'll just do this quick measurement as well. You don't have to do this one. Ellipse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope, I'm off. Sorry. That's because I think this is actually the head height that I should be looking at. I was looking at the cranial method. So 1, 2, 3. Am I off? Wait, sorry. Hold on. My head is all messed up. So this should be the pubic arch, which means this should be roughly the head. No, the head's up here. Head. Yeah, I messed up my measurements, but you know what? We roll with it. We roll with it. If I could have used a chart to break this down, I would have. But oh well. I'll make these marks thicker. So that I know where my actual halves are. So 1, bam, half, and half, and then there's our eighth. And we're measuring things in proportion. So 1, 2. Yes. 3, 4. Huh. I needed people who are paying more attention than me to tell me what I'm doing wrong here. If my measurement system is actually just flawed because it's not like perfect. Or what? It might be just because I measured it all wrong. But something is not right I don't think I cut this into perfect. I think it's because I didn't measure it perfectly that I kind of messed up this system. One, two. Huh. Something's afoot. Something's afoot. 2, 3. Yeah, if I just start fudging the head size, yeah, then everything lines up. But whatever. We'll just roll with it. If you drew a more accurate measurement than me, that's really good. At least 2 things are afoot, you think. No, the foot begins like way down here, halfway down this measurement. Oh, I think what I did wrong, according to the method we went over, I didn't start my half measurement from here instead for the legs. So maybe that's what it is. At least 2 things are, oh, it's like a pun. So 1, half is roughly here instead, actually. Oh, that explains a few things. Sorry, I'm just lagging. I'm dragging behind. If you've already started it, based on what we've gone over, that's awesome. I'm getting my crap together. So, about halfway through. It's about here. We'll break this in half. Break that in half some more. We'll shave off a little bit here at the end, and then we measure this. This is the half now. Half, half, half. 8 heads. I'll do this. 1, 2, 3. I'm off. Man, my sight measuring is trash today. It's okay, we're all human. But it's probably not very encouraging when the guy you're learning from is having an off day. Happens to everyone, even Sensei is human. Thank you. Alright. So, I think this measurement system holds ground, holds water. I'll just adjust that one more time. What's in this one? There's nothing on that layer. Okay. Okay. And I'll just draw a head. 1, 2, 3. Messed up already. 4-ish. This is your pubic bone. Roughly where it lines up. Then halfway down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Something messed up. Something messed up, but whatever. According to this method, it should check out. It's supposed to check out. Wow, what did I do with my measurements in the back half here? How odd, but roughly it's where it needs to be. So let's just get into it. Let's just get into it already. Using the rough measurement system that you've got. Remember how everything aligns? Everything basically breaks down into halves. And draw your gestures roughly based on each landmark. If you need to start with the head, you can. If you want to start in as just in general ways, remember that all the way halfway down, this is where the pubic arch is, which is basically the bottom of the crotch. So let's start with the gesture to see where everything is. We understand that one head length down, rather somewhere like midway down. No, one whole head length down. That's the pit of the neck. That's the pit of the what was it called? Pit of the neck, whatever. This is one full head length. So it goes like that. It doesn't seem correct. To me, it didn't seem correct. That's why I was about to measure it higher than it should have been. But it is. And we're just going to measure. We're going to measure it based on where things are. We're looking at what we're seeing. So I'm going to put this shoulder actually a little bit higher. It looks like this goes kind of like this. We're looking at what we're seeing. If that sounds foreign, it's because in drawing, a lot of the times people make up what they're seeing, even though they're looking at exactly like what they're trying to draw. They'll make up angles. They'll make up things that in their head make sense. You can't do that. You cannot be making things up when you're especially when you're drawing from life. You can do that in fiction, in fictional drawings. You cannot apply that train of thought into reality. So I'm messing up, partially because my proportions are off. Why is my But yeah, this is just all messed up. What's going on? 1 head length, 2 head length, 3 head length, 4. Would anyone like to give their insight on why I'm beefing this? How am I beefing this proportion? You got a paper cut? Ah! You hate it. You hate it. Half head length. Half head length. Professor is tired. Professor might be a little bit tired. We've been going for a lot longer than I intended to. But I really, really want to make sure I at least deliver one proportionate drawing today. Sensei must sleep on it and come back tomorrow. No, we can afford to finish this at least. He's on his tiptoe, but it's on the same plane as the thing. Maybe the line of action should be curved in the other direction. There's a possibility. That's how it should be. Control Z. So maybe it's actually more like that. Yes, it does follow sort of like that, but it doesn't answer why my proportions are like really, really off. Aside from, well, you know what? I know I'm off. So I'm fudging my measuring system. I can feel it in my bones the way that I am off. So I'm going to fudge the measuring system a bit. Into where I know in my heart of hearts this is supposed to be. And I know I just said don't make things up. Try not to make things up. But you also still got to follow, like, what are you seeing? What I was seeing was a much, like, lankier figure. Or at least it was a much different figure than what I had put my guides down on. My guides can be a little bit wrong. That's okay. Trapezius. And we'll draw the gesture of this arm. It still aligns roughly with the bottom of the 10th rib. He's at a slight angle. So some of the proportions also don't fully match. That's one problem here. But we're just doing our best. This is I'm still a little bit in the gesture of this figure. And then we'll refine with a bit more proportion. I did not go over a part of the video that maybe now, in retrospect, I should have. It was about triangulation. Basically, you look for a triangle, and I'll hover over into the video. You see there's a small triangle created. It's more like a rectangle, but you can simplify it down into a triangle. there's a greater triangle being formed by his body, by his arm there, and that informs roughly how that should go. It lines up roughly on his upper waist, actually, where his navel is. Around here-ish. So that doesn't go there. It's much lower. It's rather much higher than what I had depicted. So around here. I know I misjudged where the pubic bone should be, so it's slightly lower than where it is on my measurement guide. And we're drawing a more... You can still use gesture. But we're trying to constrain it within proportion. And when all else fails, we can always refer back to our initial head measurement, our cranial method, for how things measure out and what we need to alter in order to create a more proportionate figure. His leg is actually straight on, so it isn't actually... There is no perspective applied to it. It's just... He's just resting. He's in contrapposto right now. Contrapposto, I like to say pasto, but that's not correct. Contrapposto is when, basically when you hit that sassy curve, that sassy little hip counterweight in your body. Ancient Greeks figured this out several thousand years ago. And then they recovered it by the Renaissance. So here's my drawing. It's slightly off. There's a bit more motion through this leg. But bodies are a lot more stout than you might believe. You might be led to believe. I don't have enough. This central figure is lacking being, is lacking stretching and tautness through the torso. And we're still not drawing a completely accurate figure here. We're just trying to see how this all breaks down. He's actually got a little bit more angle in this upright leg than I give him credit for. And this leg is on its tiptoe, so it gets to be raised a little bit. So roughly, this is my figure. And we know from our previous measuring guides, if this is like the cranium, this is roughly one cranial unit. The head extends half of a cranial unit, and the head itself is like roughly 2 cranial units. But I'll measure using what we've got here. And we'll see where this drawing could be changed. So I'll try the cranial unit first. I could be using it wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're already off. And because we know this is off, because we can tell this is off, that means one or more parts of this drawing are out of proportion. So let's adjust. So knowing that, well, actually, let's instead actually do the actual head proportion that we actually have, and base it on that. So 1, this is already off. The pit of the neck should be much lower than that. So I will not use digital drawing tools to change it. I will play fair. I will make sure it adjusts. By hand. And let's not also, again, even though I'm adjusting it for anatomy, can't make up things that aren't there. So I won't draw it within more perspective. We're looking at this at a very eye level perspective. So we aren't seeing the top of his torso, I don't think. Let's move on here. I believe the third head length, maybe that was top of the 10th rib, bottom of the 10th rib. He's at a slight angle, so maybe I should also angle this just a bit. And midway through that, roughly midway through that, would be the nipples. And nipples are much lower on the body than you think they are. Nipples are much lower on the body than you think they are. So this level of measurement is actually accurate. Yeah, bottom here. I think that's kind of accurate. Let's bring another one down. Rotating it along. So that's 4 heads. Halfway through is the navel. Something's off. To me, I don't feel like the bottom of the pubic bone should go there. I really don't. And yet, the measurement that I've made seems to line up there. Would anyone in class like to tell me where they're going in terms of making their proportions feel consistent versus what I've got going on here? Looking back and forth between what's there. Because at 4 heads down, that's supposed to be the pubic bone. But that doesn't align. I don't think that aligns. And even when I rotated the head to match along the curve of the spine, it still landed me like right here. So that's intriguing. It really is. I'll just keep going then. At around halfway down, bring it once more. And then the way this is supposed to line up, if I were doing the proper method, it'd actually be a lot shorter. Huh. You don't know if you did it right. So, we know if we did this right, based on our head method. We drew basically a person looking straight on. There's not a lot of like proportion at play here. So I think I drew this figure too tall. And even if I mess with this to instead be 8 heads tall, I've still drawn this person too long. So I think that was the major shortcoming of what I did. So I'll modify this just a bit. You've drawn something disproportionately if it doesn't match the proportion system you know is supposed to be correct. So let's see. If I were to draw just a little bit more in correct perspective. Where's my drawing? Where's my... There we go. Let's pull all of this back just a bit. Actually, I'll make a copy of that for comparison's sake. How many heads tall is the model? That's a good point. That's a good point. So we're over here assuming that this model can fit into 7.5 heads. I didn't actually bother to check how tall he is. So let's look. Let's look. So we're doing the head height method. So if say this is the standard by which we're measuring. 1, 2, we're at the nipples. 3, 4. He may indeed be built different. Actually, I think he's built exactly how we think he should be built. Actually, no. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, no. This is correct. He is 7.5 heads tall. He is, in fact, 7.5 heads tall. What I did, rather, at the very least. I did exactly what I should not have done. I made things up. Even Sensei is prone to mistakes, but at least Sensei is able to conclude what he did wrong. So, going by what we've done, I drew a gesture. I drew what I thought was the right proportions. They're off. They're very off. There's a whole head length here, and I think that's because I drew an eight head method, even though it should have landed us at 7 and roughly 3/4. So, very interesting. Maybe I should have cut this off a bit more. Maybe I should have cut it off like right here if I wanted to have 7.5 heads. So let's, if this is roughly the scale at which we're working with, let's just pull it back. Let's see what it makes when I work a little bit more proportionately. And you don't have to redo your figure if you don't want to. I'm doing this to satisfy my own ends. And then I'll wrap up. So, 1 head, 2 head. 1 head is past the pit of the neck. Halfway down is the pit of the neck, actually. Let's just restart that entirely. So halfway down, pit of the neck. What are we down? It's supposed to be the... Can't satisfy my ends on Twitch. That's a TOS violation. This is true. It's very, very true. It's all true. The peanuts, the Patrick, the everything. So there's that. Our torsos, much stubbier than we give them credit for. And then the pubic arch. So I'm using a box. I'm using squares to settle where everything is. I'm foregoing the gesture. I've learned where the gesture is. The gesture's through there. But the spine is moving like this. That's where my eye is drawn to. And then halfway through here, bam, knee, bam. No, right here, actually. No, that's not right. Well, according to this breakdown, it is. No, that doesn't feel right. I'm making this part up because he just looks too stout. Otherwise, am I wrong? Would anyone else like to weigh in? Does something not look right here? I'm missing something. I'm missing something really, really dramatically important, and I don't know why he isn't coming out the way he's supposed to come out. This does not look any more correct. I'm missing an extra half head. Where? Because the torso is 4 heads long. Then you take those 4 heads, you move it to the side, move it halfway down, and that's how you get the rest of your length. And this is going counter to what we just learned. So that's very, very, very odd. So what a mystery. Figure drawing is hard. Even the guy who's supposed to be teaching this class. I apologize. That I'm not getting it perfectly right. Even though in theory I should be. But this is why we practice this stuff a lot. We work from what we're looking. We have to observe the world around us. So part of me knows that like this isn't working right. Even though it should be. All of our proportion systems can't beat the human eye on what is and is not correct. So I can't quite, like, ask people to tell me, what did I do wrong? Because I'm the one who's supposed to do that. I'm supposed to be the one who says how you did it. But, let's just keep these head systems in mind. They're ideal ways to make things work. But even then, sometimes they just... I don't know. Where is this layer? All the way up there? I'm moving it down here. I'm going to take this, move it. I'm gonna overlay this over the guy to see what's missing. Sorry, I don't have a... I can't exactly do it a little better. I'll take the original figure drawing as well. Pull this up. Compare it. And I'm scaling it to his head to see what's off. Even my head measurement might have been off. So that's interesting. Like if I was trying to fit this onto the guy, yeah, I'm off still. These measuring let's say, hold on. I would say, gotta maybe sleep on it. You don't think either of the ways you did it before are necessarily wrong, because these measuring methods aren't absolute. True. This is true. We can't force everything into these methods, but we know we can, which is the strange part. But anyway, here's how these came out. Feel free to take the figure if you did this digitally, compare it. I didn't spend any moments like measuring the arms to make sure they were accurate, but this is roughly where my stuff lined up with. I can tell, I can see. I did not shoot this leg far enough. I didn't measure his head well enough either. But see how you did. Look at what you did. Compare it to how everything came out. So I think this will about do it for stream. I hope this was valuable to anyone out there. Is anyone out there who was watching? Hopefully you've gained more insight some way, somehow. I think on some level I did get it. But my proportions are still off somehow. Maybe it's simply that my whole like gesture was off. Because this is the first one. This is the first image. I had my gesture off because I was pointing. One of the chatters pointed out my gesture was not following the incorrect line of action, or at least the torso wasn't. So then when I come back and I do it here, it's a little bit more accurate, but I did not see. And this is an example of how I was not seeing correctly. This leg, too far out. It needed to be further in. This leg, too far out. Needed to be further in. On this one, I roughly got how that leg was supposed to stick out, but this should have been further in. And my arms are kind of accurate. Just a little bit on both ends. So that's neat. Got one person in chat saying, super helpful. You'll definitely be practicing this more. Awesome. Please remember, these apply to real people. Practice it with real people. If you see that your own figures of your fictional characters might be off, if they're not perfectly proportionate, you can force them to be proportionate. You can force them to do that. But this is a sort of exercise you do with a live person so that you can get a grasp for how a real person is supposed to measure out. So, homework hasn't changed from last time. It's still due on Thursday. That's lesson 4. It's still this. Practice the robo-beam. I didn't make us practice the robo-beam. Maybe I should have. Try to draw a proportional drawing. Cross-reference the cranial head method which is 11 and a half heads. You don't need to make it exact. Just try to just see where it all levels out in the end. And use the methods we went over today. Try measuring the whole thing out at once. Try measuring the whole thing out at once. Break it down into eighths. If your sighting was off like mine, it might be a little bit off. So it goes. But trying this method will probably make sure you work within certain proportion lengths. We still have homework agony. It was assigned last week, so it's no different from what it already was. But try that out. And the main reason why I say use the 11 and a half head method, it's because the cranial method, you can use it in proportion. I broke it into fifths, whatever. When you use the cranial head method, it's because the torso itself can relatively break down into 2 heads across. So cross-reference those videos to make sure you got it right. Maybe write a little sticky note to yourself about how proportions work. Or keep the video on hand that is related to that. When this VOD goes up, again, I'll link to all the videos used and all the resources used. And I'll link to the artists I was referring to from the Shapes and Perspective ramble and stuff. Just to look at. And, alright. That's all I have for today. Keep practicing figure drawing. We'll all get better together. And we'll reawaken powers we used to have. I've lost a little bit of it. But we'll all learn together. So, I'll see you on Thursday, if you show up to that. Have a good night, good day, good afternoon.